Chapter 3. The Village of Elves. Phew, that was quite the run. So, the Village of Elves is located somewhere in this forest? My party and I were currently deep in the Forest of Crests, a verdant maze located in the southeastern part of Gon, close to the border of Tryson. After reading the letter from Beast King Lenhart, we had taken a few days to prepare and then gone straight there in person. The journey had been shorter than expected, as our speed on foot was now several times that of what a horse could manage. The contents of the letter had been straightforward. In what was presumably King Lenhart's very own hand were the words, "Notification of Rank S promotion exam." It had been so unexpected that I'd almost fallen over with surprise. The bold brush strokes went well with the contents of the letter to deliver an incredibly impactful impression. My immediate reaction had been, why is the King of Gon the one issuing my promotion exam? Luckily, Rio had been close at hand to provide some much-needed explanation. According to him, there were a total of 4 conditions that needed to be met for an adventurer to be promoted to rank S. 1. Clear 10 consecutive quests ranked or higher. 2. Experience with clearing a rank S quest. 3. Acknowledgement from at least 2 of the 4 monarchs in power on the Eastern Continent. This condition was different on the Western Continent. 4. Successfully pass the promotion exam under the supervision of an incumbent rank S adventurer. In my case, the first 2 conditions had already been met, which left only the 3rd and 4th points. And it was those that Lenhart's letter was addressing. Rio had already done the legwork and obtained acknowledgement from the Queen of Turai, the only monarch that I knew personally. She had apparently given her approval without blinking an eye. I guess connections are important no matter what world you're in. However, I still needed acknowledgement from one other monarch. Tryson was not likely to be cooperative about anything at the moment, so that left Gon and Daramus, and it just so happened that the Beast King of Gon was the first one to respond. The royal family of Gon had a custom where the children were required to set out on a journey of training once they turned 10. After making it all the way to rank S during his own trek, King Lenhart had returned to immediately clinch the championship at a battle royale hosted to determine the strongest person in the land, thus solidifying his claim to the throne. I'm hardly in a position to say this of someone else, but he got up to quite a lot of trouble, didn't he? The letter I had received from this impressive ruler had been an offer for him to personally oversee my promotion exam as a rank S adventurer himself. He would merely be observing from the shadows, though, which meant that I wouldn't actually meet him. As I was wondering just how the matter had blown up to such epic proportions, Rio explained that Tsubaki-sama had been talking King Lenhart's ear off in praise of me. Even in the country of Beastkin, a place that valued strength above all else, rank S candidates were hard to come by. In other words, the king's interest had been piqued, and he was serving as proctor to take a look at me with his own eyes. This place feels nostalgic, for some reason, Ephil murmured as she absent-mindedly stared at the trees spread out before us. Isn't that because you're half-elf? I replied. The elven blood in you might be responding to the thick magic coming from the forest. Sarah interjected, but aren't elves a race that came from the Western Continent? I've heard of adventurers and merchants encountering wandering elves every once in a while, but was taught that their main settlement isn't located around here. Pure-blood elves were insular and hard to come by. Just as Sarah said, the few wandering about the Eastern Continent of their own free will were generally outliers. According to Rio, a group of them emigrated to the Eastern Continent a few decades ago and set up a settlement here. Even he didn't know the reason for it, but in any case, they are now under Gon's protection. Gerard nodded understandingly. Ah, and the aim of our exam is to protect this settlement. The task, as set out in the letter from King Lenhart, was to subjugate the as yet unverified monsters that were terrorizing the elven village. Unfortunately, what was happening to the elves was likely part of the same trouble that was cropping up on all of Trison's borders with its neighbors. As for what was actually wrong, dangerous new monsters had been showing up in the forest as of late. While the native inhabitants of the region were creatures that could easily be subjugated by Rank D adventurers, there was a new breed wandering around with Rank B monsters in tow. Based on that fact alone, it was thought that this new threat was likely Rank S itself. The average Ghanaian soldier couldn't even stand up to its followers one-on-one, much less do anything about the big bad those monsters were accompanying. Consequently, the fight was not going well, to put it mildly. Normally, in a case like this, the king or more powerful members of the army would be deployed to handle the problem. However, the recent increase in overall monster aggression was stretching Gon's military resources thin already. From King Lenhart's perspective, it was a good opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. He could gauge my strength and have this problem resolved without having to personally get involved. I didn't mind the arrangement, myself. After all, it wasn't every day that I got to fight a Rank S monster. Kel Ni, you think Trison is involved in this somehow? Almost certainly, yeah. Elves don't age, and both males and females have very attractive appearances. I wouldn't be surprised by the idea of people wanting them as slaves. Just like yourself, my king? That's right, just like Kelvin. Those words do sound convincing coming from you, honey. Why are you guys looking at me? I haven't done anything that Eiffel herself didn't want. And I don't ever plan to, either. So, elf characters were your thing, Kel Ni? That's a misunderstanding, Ryan. This was something I had noticed only recently, but Ryan's knowledge was actually quite skewed. With one prominent example being how she routinely burst in on my bath. Supposedly because siblings are supposed to bathe together. I suspected she had probably consumed a lot of manga and light novels during her previous life, and had taken everything depicted within as truth. As her new brother, it was my duty to give her a proper education. Just as I added that new and highly noble goal to my mental to-do list, Eiffel tugged my sleeve slightly, saying, "Please don't let it bother you, master. I love you with all my heart, and I take great pride in being your slave." I knew it, Eiffel has got to be an angel. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow. The forest where the elves lived was called the Forest of Crests because of the magical crests carved into so many of the trees all throughout the region. According to Analyze I, they served to maintain a magical barrier that helped to repel intruders. The fact that we were equally subject to their effects was a problem, though. I had Sarah take a look from up in the air, but the barrier went so far as to project an illusion from above, preventing the settlement's location from being pinpointed that way. Honey, I'll go ahead and buff your directional senses, all right? It's that way, Kelvin. I see, Kel Ni, the little bird said that the village is that way. Master, I feel the sensation of nostalgia I mentioned coming strongly from that direction. Fortunately, my concerns about finding the village were unfounded. Melfina had her spells, Sarah had her intuition, Ryan could strike up a rapport with the local wildlife and ask for directions, and Eiffel had whatever pull she was feeling from her elven blood. In short, we had a plethora of ways to circumvent the magical barriers. We struck a straight path through the trees that soon brought us before a pair of watchtowers and a large wooden wall. What if we had gotten lost on the way? Who would subjugate the monsters then? Of course, I suppose getting through on our own is meant to be part of the exam. Unfortunately, we had not encountered the Rank S monster or any of its lackeys along the way. "You there, stop," shouted a voice from one of the watchtowers as we approached the gate. "This forest is protected by magic. You cannot have wandered here by mistake. Identify yourselves." Looking up, we spotted 3 elves aiming drawn arrows in our direction. We are here in response to a royal summons from King Lenhart. I am the adventurer Kelvin, and this is my party. An emissary from His Majesty? This is our letter of introduction. Please have a look. I held up the letter of introduction penned by Lenhart, which Rio had given to me before we left, then used green magic to generate a gentle breeze that brought the letter up and into the elf's hand. Hold on a moment, we'll go check with the elder. Please wait here. Sure thing, no problem. Wow, straight to the elder. No surprise, given the letter is from the king himself. It sure works wonders to have such contacts. Although it does bother me a bit that the other 2 are still pointing their arrows at us. I guess they must be on edge from all the recent attacks. It wasn't long before the guard who'd taken my letter returned. Thank you for waiting. We welcome you as guests. Please accept my apologies for the unpleasant reception. Open the gates. The wooden door rose up with a deep rumbling sound. We walked through and found a large number of elves gathered in what must have been the main square of the village. Every one of them looked young and beautiful, without a single wrinkle or sign of age on any of their faces. At the front of the crowd stood a single male. Is he the elder? Damn, even he looks young. Thank you for coming all this way. I am Neles, the elder of this village. Ah, so I was right. Nice to meet you. I'm Kelvin, and I proceeded to introduce my companions one by one. But when I got to Eiffel, thud. How can this be? Elder? What is the matter? The moment he laid eyes on Eiffel, the elf's knees gave way and he fell flat on his butt. A few others within the crowd looked extremely startled as well. Our Rummel? Why, how are you still alive? Who's Rummel? Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. After Neles regained his composure, the commotion quickly died down, and the crowd dispersed. We were invited to his house, where we could resume the conversation in private. As we settled into the sofas, a serving woman brought us drinks that looked like black tea but gave off a fragrance unfamiliar to me. What kind of tea is this? Judging from the smell, it's a high-class blend using several varieties of magic-abundant herbs that can be found in this forest. Professor Melfina had answered my question without missing a beat. To be able to identify it from the smell alone, she sure is high-spec'd in the weirdest places. So, the fact that we're being served high-class tea probably means that we're being welcomed, right? In that case, why were the elves so surprised just now? Kelvin Dono, I'm terribly sorry about that, the elder apologized. Oh, don't worry about it. I'm not bothered, and neither is Eiffel. Rather than an apology. You wish to know why I reacted that way, yes? If you're willing to tell us, we're happy to listen. After lowering his eyes for a moment in thought, Neles raised his head to look at me and Eiffel in turn. Very well. This is a story that isn't directly related to the request from His Majesty, but it is extremely important to you, Eiffel-san. Important to me? I could see Eiffel unconsciously clenching her fists just above her knees. This was something that happened far back when we were still living on the Western continent. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow. The elder's story went back about 20 years. At the time, the elves had been living peacefully deep within a forest on the Western continent. Just like in the Forest of Crests, that settlement had also been hidden behind several layers of magical barriers and had almost no contact with the outside world. There were elves who would leave of their own volition, but the vast majority of the population stayed sequestered in the village. Elves had always been a target for other races due to their rarity and beautiful appearances. This was one reason why they had become so insular, and even now, they only ever associated regularly with the beastkin. Years ago, the elves had taken the extreme measure of emigrating to another continent after a devastating encounter with a dragon. And it was no ordinary dragon, but one of the eminent kings of the dragon race, the Flame Dragon King. His strength was far beyond that of the beast we had faced in Turai. Despite both monsters being rank S, the Flame Dragon King was at the most powerful end of the spectrum. The Flame Dragon King's nest was located at the mouth of a volcano far enough away that he would normally have had no reason to become involved with the elves. But that fateful day, something changed. The weather was beautiful, and the sky was a clear blue. The trees rustled in a gentle breeze, and the sun shone warmly. Then, a shadow fell over the village square. Everyone who noticed it thought that it was a cloud at first. But as it gradually grew larger, they began to grow suspicious. The real indication of danger was when the trees surrounding the village were suddenly torn up by massive gusts of wind. The protective barrier that had been cast upon the forest gave way as a huge red form crashed into their midst. "Bring me the elf who has disgraced me. If not, I will reduce you all to ashes along with your precious forest." Every elf present had been stupefied, their minds scrambling to comprehend the situation they suddenly found themselves in. As they looked on in dumbfounded astonishment, the unfortunate villager who happened to be closest was snapped up in the blink of an eye. He likely hadn't even registered the fact that he was being eaten. No. All hell descended upon the village. The forest was set ablaze as the elves ran about in a panic. The dragon was eating people indiscriminately, men, women and children alike, and those who escaped his jaws soon succumbed to the greedy flames. When the population had been reduced to roughly a fourth of its original number, something extraordinary happened. A lone woman stood up before the dragon, saying, "I offer myself to take the remainder of your anger. In exchange, please let everyone else go." The elf who had presented herself with calm and composure had been exceptionally beautiful even for her kind, and possessed a great and generous heart. Even the dragon awoke from his frenzied rage after setting eyes on her and stopped his rampage. "You are not the elf that I am searching for. Yet your beauty is such that even I, as a member of a different race, find you attractive and appealing to the eye. Very well. If you agree to be my wife, I am willing to write off the disgrace that your compatriot caused me." High-tiered dragons had the ability to take on humanoid form. In other words, they could conceive children with other races if they so wished. The matter of what had first enraged the Flame Dragon King was still unclear, but at least there was a path to reconciliation. After a brief internal struggle, the woman replied, "I will agree to be your wife. But may I have a bit of time to say farewell to my family and friends?" "Very well. I will return tonight. Do what you have to do by then. I'm sure there is no need to say this, but do not think of running away." With those words, the monster took off into the sky. The woman watched as he disappeared into the distance, and once she was sure that he had departed, fell to her knees and burst into tears. She was still young and had been engaged. But her fiancé had fallen into the dragon's belly and was now lost. The village elder had also lost his life during the commotion, leaving his son, Nelas, to step in as their new leader. Under normal circumstances, it was customary to celebrate such an event with merriment and feasting, but that was the last thing on anyone's mind at present. Thrust into the role, Nelas found himself facing several tasks of enormous weight, not the least of which was monitoring the woman who was to be the dragon's wife to ensure that she did not run away, and figuring out how to rebuild their race after the devastating attack. Under watchful eyes, the condemned woman spent her precious remaining time with her surviving relatives. Then night fell, and the promised time arrived. The dragon returned, the loud flapping of its enormous wings banishing the silence. There were no longer tears on the woman's face. Just before she was taken away, the last words she uttered were, "Please forget about me." Several years later, the woman's body was found lying in the forest. Filled with fear by this discovery, the elves decided to abandon their ancestral home. The survivors of their race banded together and headed for new lands, pinning their hopes on the country of Gon on the eastern continent. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. And that is the story of how our race came to live here, Nellis concluded. Even to this day, none of us know why the Flame Dragon King attacked us, nor do we know who the elf was who angered him so. A heavy atmosphere had enveloped the room. I cleared my throat lightly. And the woman who was taken away by the dragon was Rumel, yes. She was the one I mistook Iphyl-san for. So, if I'm getting this right, this Rumel was Iphil's mother and, hold on, her father is the Flame Dragon King? That isn't possible, honey. Iphyl is a half-elf, which means she was born from the union of a human and an elf. She would be an entirely different race if the Flame Dragon King were to have been her father. Oh, okay, then. I sighed in relief. The mystery deepens. Which reminds me, Iphyl was suffering from the curse of the Flame Dragon King when I first met her. Now the curse has been reversed into a blessing, but she suffered for a long time because of it. Then again, the case could be made that it was because of the curse that she and I came together, but, hold on, how is Iphyl taking this? Nellis continued speaking. I knew Rumel personally, and I saw her body with my own eyes. Iphyl-san, I'm so sorry to say this, but it's all right, Nellis-sama. I've never known a father or a mother in my life. I don't have any memories of either. So there is no need to worry about me. I have master and all my companions now, Iphyl replied, resting her head on my shoulder. Guess I don't need to worry after all. So, you have found your lifelong companion. As one of your race, I am happy for you. What? Oh, no, master and I aren't like that. Iphyl was all flustered in a rare show of embarrassment. Feeling the holes being bored into my back by Sarah's and Melfina's gazes, I couldn't bring myself to respond. As they say, silence is golden. Hollow diamond. Learning something about Iphil's birth, even if it was just on her mother's side, was an unexpected bonus. However, our goal in coming here had been to protect the elves. It was about time to move on to the real business. Nellis-san, do you have a map of the area around the village? I asked. A map? Of course we do, he replied, signaling the serving woman. You don't have to rush that much, I thought, as she exited the room in a hurry. According to what I was told, a new species of monster and its followers are going around kidnapping your people. Is that correct? Yes, that's right. We have a barrier cast throughout the forest that confuses the directional senses of those who step inside, but it appears to be ineffective against these new creatures. Well, that sort of barrier can be circumvented with the right skills. We just proved it ourselves. It wouldn't be surprising for high-level monsters to be capable of the same thing. We have suffered 3 raids so far. Strangely, they do not attack us unless we attack them first. If we don't fight back, they are willing to retreat peacefully after grabbing several of our inhabitants. That sounds awfully organized for monsters. They show self-discipline, don't kill unnecessarily, and are able to stick to their orders to kidnap the elves. Naturally, we tried resisting at first. But our strength was insufficient to take down even the weaker ones. The soldiers deployed by Gon did not fare much better. Now, all we can do is wait in fear for the fiends to take their leave in order to prevent any further unnecessary sacrifices. At this rate, the elves will have no choice but to abandon this settlement and move again. Although the elder hasn't said so, I imagine it's a decision he's already weighing in his mind. You may rest easy, Nellis Dono, said Gerard. We have come to stop that very thing from happening ever again. That's right. We promise to protect you all, Melfina added. Ryan raised a clenched fist in a show of confidence. Alex and I will do our best. The Shadow Wolf followed up with an, Arf. Clearly, my companions were plenty motivated, perhaps due to Ephial's ties to the village. I felt much the same myself. And there you have it, Nelas-san. My party is more than eager to get started. To that end, I have a question. May we have permission to make a few changes to the village? Changes? Are you planning to set up traps? Something like that. Once we have your permission, I promise that never again will a monster touch a hair on any of your heads. If nothing is done, the number of victims will only climb. Very well. Do as you see fit, Kelvin Dono. Thank you very much. All right, we've got permission. Looks like things are about to get busy. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. Elder, we've done what the adventurers asked us to, but... Kelvin Dono, what is all this? Half a day after my party flew into action, the village of elves had undergone a complete makeover. I was extremely satisfied with our workmanship, and it was heartening to see the locals trembling with excitement and gratitude. Everything is prepared for the next monster assault. We did a pretty good job, if I do say so myself. As for the explanation, Mel, you want the honors? Sure thing, Melfina readily replied with a bright smile. Nelas-san and inhabitants of the village, may I have your attention please? Melfina was in an extremely good mood, likely because she had just consumed a frightening number of plates of the local cuisine. By now, she had shamelessly assumed the position of being the gluttonous member of our party. I shuddered to imagine the drain on our finances if I had been capable of summoning her at the start of my journey. Thank goodness she took so long to finish her artificial body. First of all, the wooden wall around this village was almost entirely useless for stopping the invasion of rank B monsters. It was nowhere near high enough, let alone strong enough. Based on the details the Elder had given us, most of the monsters that came for them were gigantic humanoids that sounded a lot like Cyclops or ogres. Against such opponents, the previous wall had been lacking in both durability and scale. Scars left by the previous assaults gave testament to that fact. So, what we have done is erect a new wall outside of the current one. This new fortification, created entirely with green magic, is 3 times higher and tough enough to withstand an assault by rank A monsters. The top of this new wall can be accessed by stairs on the inside, and defenders are free to unleash both magic and arrows onto their assailants from above. Furthermore, the outer part of the wall is surrounded by a moat, with the sole entrance to the village being the drawbridge at the main gate. The drawbridge is, of course, made from the same material as the wall. The water in the moat, as you may guess, is not mere water. I would strongly advise you not to touch it under any circumstances, as it could kill you. C. Don't worry, we'll revert your village to the way it was once all of this is over, I added. Nothing we've done will permanently damage the environment. Basically, I had surrounded the village with multiple casts of adamantite rampart, Melfina had filled the surrounding trench with water, and Sarah had spammed a ton of black magic spells into the new moat. To be honest, this was all merely insurance and for the sake of appearance. We had no intention of letting the monsters get close to the settlement in the first place. Then how about this, it is a watchtower, isn't it? Asked Nelas. That's right. It's just a bit higher than usual is all, Melfina answered. What the Elder was pointing to with a trembling hand was the special tower that I had erected in the middle of the village square. I had taken to calling it the Arrow Tower, since it had been created for Ephial's exclusive use and was so much higher than the other watchtowers. I'd created it with adamantite rampart as well. What a convenient spell that is. I can make almost any kind of building I want as long as I think of it as a collection of walls. That is a platform built specially for Ephil to snipe from, Melfina continued. It has been rendered invisible to anyone outside the walls with my blue magic spell False Fog. Thanks to the illusions offered by the barriers that you originally had in place, the effect is twofold. Nellas laughed incredulously. But with the tower being that tall, how will she be able to hit her targets? As elves, we are quite confident in our archery skills, but even we. Not to worry, Eiffel said reassuringly. Leave the cover fire to me. There you have it. If Eiffel says she can do it, then she can do it. During our test run, every single arrow she shot landed precisely where it was meant to, I said, holding up a bundle of rabbit-like monster carcasses and fruits commonly found in the forest. The rabbit creatures all had arrows protruding from their foreheads, and each fruit had been pierced right through the middle. Eiffel had hit them all flawlessly from up in her tower. The elves erupted into cheers of approval. With Melfina's explanation complete, I proceeded to go over our plans for the coming fight. When the monsters arrive, Eiffel and I will provide support to the entire battlefield from that tower. Gerard will be protecting the drawbridge. Sarah, Mel, Ryan, and Alex will be outside of the walls to intercept the assault. Clotho was going to be our secret ace. Depending on how the initial confrontation went, I would be summoning the slime wherever it was needed as the ultimate hit-and-run force. Oh, and just in case, I'll be posting several golems around as well. Each of them has the strength of a rank A monster, so they should be of some use. Kelvin Dono. What is it? The elder had suddenly grabbed my hands as tears streamed down his face. What the hell's going on? You must be the savior we have been waiting for all this time. Oh, Lenhart Sama. We cannot thank you enough for sending Kelvin Dono to our midst. Everyone, tonight we will host a feast. The elves roared with delight, bringing joy and hope back to drive out the depressing mood that had previously enveloped the village. Even so, isn't the elder getting a bit too emotional? After receiving the greatest amount of hospitality that the elves could offer, the only thing left was to actually protect the village. And afterwards, make Tryson pay, of course, as they were in all likelihood involved in some way. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. When night fell, silence reigned in the forest of crests. The majority of creatures that lived there were diurnal and therefore back in their nests and fast asleep at this hour, leaving only a few species out and about. This night, however, saw the presence of monsters that were not native to the ecosystem. Figures towering as high as trees, moving together in a group that looked far too orderly to be wild beasts doing their own things. In fact, if one were to put a name on it, it looked like an army of monsters. Lieutenant General, our preparations are done, said a young man with a sharp salute. Sitting on a fallen log before him was a man in his 30s. At both of their hips were whips that were more specialized for instilling obedience than for attacking. This characteristic identified the two of them as tamers. That was faster than I expected. Naturally. Today is our fourth time, after all. And what's more, tonight is when we can finally round up all of those lowly subhumans. Although I understand we're kidnapping them little by little to make Gon divert its forces, we've all grown so bored with it. Don't you feel the same, Lieutenant General? The younger man asked with a nasty smirk. Tryson was a country that touted human supremacy. Having been taught this ideology from birth, the citizens considered demi-human slaves as being worth less than dirt. This young man was no exception. Of his own accord, he had enlisted with the mixed monster order that used demi-humans and monsters as slave troops. He had done so well that he had made the rank of colonel in spite of his young age. Like you wouldn't believe. However, seeing the elves cowering helplessly is the funniest damn thing. They honestly believe we won't attack them if they don't resist. Even though the kidnapped ones are either going to the labs or being assigned to the troops so they can let off some steam. Just saying, but I personally would never touch a filthy demi-human. Just thinking about it makes me feel dirty. That's because you're a noble. It's not all that bad, really. As they say, don't knock it till you try it. I think I'll refrain. I'd rather throw them into the pens where my monsters sleep. Now that's entertainment. You are aware that that's equally fucked up, right? Just then, the clouds that had been covering the moon moved off, with the illumination revealing the forces that were currently lying in wait around them. It was a host that easily numbered more than 1,000 and represented an enormous variety of species, not only the giant types seen by the Elder. What's more, each and every one of them were rank B or higher. Despite having the fewest number of human troops, rarely exceeding 500 soldiers, the mixed monster order was usually assigned to the front lines for Trison's battles. This was because every single one of its human members were tamers, each of whom controlled numerous monsters. These tamers felt no love or compassion for their slaves, seeing them merely as easily replaceable tools of war meant to be used up and discarded. During the age of the Great War, Trison had thrown hordes of these disposable monsters at its enemies to great effect, plunging many an opposing army into terror and despair. At present, half of the mixed monster order's forces had been gathered. The man leading the operation was the order's second-in-command, the Lieutenant General. General Tristan's idea was to purposely leak information to Gon and crush the forces they deployed in response. We finally had some success with the last attempt, but the ones who came were mere foot soldiers. We've let enough stragglers go and given Gon plenty of time to prepare, so I'm expecting some serious resistance on this fourth raid. Then again, if they haven't sent any more troops over, we'll just take our sweet time grabbing the elves, so it works out either way. No worries, Lieutenant General. With all the troops we brought, we could win hands down even if the Beast King himself and his sons show up. What's more, we have that monstrosity behind you. Kneeling quietly behind the older man was an exceptionally large giant, around whose neck was a thick collar decorated with ancient script. Where does the general even get those collars? Not that I'm complaining. Thanks to them, it's become so much easier to capture monsters. I've only heard rumors, but supposedly they're being supplied by a merchant who's been visiting the castle quite frequently lately. I've no idea who he is, but I do know these collars have got to be pretty high-ranked items, considering how easily they subdue even the most fierce creatures. Then we have these specially made ones that are effective against even rank S monsters. I still can't help but marvel at their efficiency. I believe you told me that only 3 of those have been made, right? And that General Tristan actually gave one of them to Prince Asgrad? What a waste, right? When I think of how much stronger that single collar could have made our order. But it's General Tristan we're talking about. I'm sure it was done with some specific idea in mind. Probably to make the prince indebted to him, if I had to guess. So now the prince owes him a favor? I'm just saying, maybe. Anyway, it's about time. You know the plan, right? You'll be setting off with the 4th Regiment first, then Colonel Dill will follow a short while afterwards with the 5th Regiment. What about you, Lieutenant General? Depends on how the situation plays out. All right, let's stomp some woodland scum. The Lieutenant General raised his arm high, then brought it down in the direction of the village. The army of monsters began lumbering forward, their footsteps pounding a deep drumbeat of inexorable death. Despite having progressed almost halfway through the forest, the 4th Regiment, including the flying monsters that had been scouting ahead, had yet to see a hint of resistance. Colonel, looks like the cowards from Gon aren't here. You think they got scared of us and ran? With how much noise we're making, there's no way they haven't noticed us coming. Stay vigilant against an ambush just in case. It's the kind of pathetic strategy they would use. Raucous laughter rose up from the soldiers gathered at the back of the procession. Did these tamers seem so at ease because they thought they were in the safest position of the formation? Or was it because they felt protected standing behind so many strong and powerful monsters? Either way, they continued swaggering onwards, clearly never having been taught that there was nowhere safe in a battle, or else having forced all such warnings from their minds. No one noticed anything when they stepped right into the kill zone. A tamer that had been riding a monster suddenly slumped over. The colonel, who happened to be looking in his direction at the time, asked in alarm, "What's wrong?" A nearby soldier replied, "No idea, sir. He just fell over." The surrounding soldiers stepped over to wake their comrade up. What the? A small, well-defined hole between the man's brows could be seen, almost as if something had bored straight through it. Blood was spurting from the hole. Even an amateur could tell that he was already dead. Is this from an arrow? It can't be. I didn't hear any noise. And the scouts didn't warn us. Besides, the settlement is still a ways off. But then how do you expel? Kerr. The sound of another death cry rang out from a short distance away. A second victim had fallen. We're under attack. We're under attack. Use the monsters as walls and protect yourselves. The enemy is using some kind of invisible assault. The relaxed atmosphere from a moment before was instantly replaced by panic and mayhem. The soldiers quickly ducked behind the monsters and trees, but anyone who tried to peek out promptly took an arrow to the head. I've never heard of such an attack before. Are we supposed to advance towards the settlement under these conditions? It's suicide. Slowly, the procession inched forward under the constant threat of this incomprehensible ambush. The face of the young colonel grew paler and paler by the minute. "Ephil, get the guy hiding behind the troll next." "Yes, master. Leave the one who looks higher ranked than the rest. We'll catch him later to ask a few questions." From the moment Trison's force had come within range of Ephil's bow, she'd been picking them off one by one from up in her arrow tower. I was standing next to her and, after having borrowed Farsight with Skill Eater, providing some additional support. From what I saw, all of the human soldiers were tamers. The strategy they were going with seemed to be a simple brute force frontal push. It was obvious, then, that the army would fall apart if we took out the soldiers in the back. After all, without their control, the monsters they were responsible for would lose any sense of purpose or direction. If these tamers had been close to their monsters and actually took care of them, we would have used a different approach. But with these jokers, chances of that sort of bond were nil. "Looks like the bow's performing well," I commented. "I feel like if I just inject enough magic, I can shoot as far I want. Furthermore, it really is amazing that it doesn't make any sound at all." The newest bow that I had presented to Ephil was made for covert use. The way that Merciless worked was, the user would pour their magic into the bow to generate special arrows, and the range could be freely adjusted based on the amount of magic the weapon was imbued with. In addition, it was absolutely silent to use. There was no creaking of the bowstring when drawing nor any whistling from the flight of the arrows themselves. Furthermore, the arrows were hidden by concealment upon leaving the bow and disappeared altogether after striking their targets. It was a weapon that could kill silently and without leaving a trace of evidence. "Our guests have arrived. Whenever you guys see someone, pass the info along to me, and I'll add it in." Thanks to the map I had gotten from the Elder and a bit of scouting beforehand, I was now quite familiar with the surrounding terrain. All that was left to do was fill it in with the positions of our enemies. Thanks to parallel processing, I could give out orders while updating the map in real time. "You youngsters have fun out there." "You bet we will," Sarah replied. "You won't get any time in the spotlight tonight, Gerard, so just stay where you are and take a nap." "Sarah, you remember that we aren't supposed to kill them all, right?" Melfina chided. "Thanks for the reminder, Mel Nay. We've gotta catch the important-looking one, right? If possible, yes. But our top priority is protecting the village. And try to keep damage to the environment to a minimum." I watched as Sarah, Melfina, and Ryan all scattered out into the forest. All right. Let's stomp some monsters.